There we go. I'm not sure what happened there. Technical difficulties. Usually we do the stuff on Zoom or one of the other platforms. I thought it might be interesting to do it tonight with YouTube. Um, Something different. It records automatically, and you guys can go back and watch it, or we can try some different stuff. So thanks for joining. As you guys saw, I'll give you my 1 second pitch. I'm the owner of trailbreak.com. Work with AIM through cars, a little bit of karting, lots and lots of analysis, all sorts of RS3 hardware, all that. So with that, there you go. If you need something, I'd love to help you. But tonight I wanted to jump into some of the software things and answer some of the questions that people had in the forums, give you an idea of the rundown of how RS3 works, and kind of go from there. If there's stuff you guys want to hit, throw it into the chat and I'll keep an eye on that so we can go through those kind of things. Or I'll just kind of start with what we had in the forum and go from there. So a couple things that might catch people off with Race Studio 3 is make sure if you're in the beginning parts of it and you see an arrow at this blue icon up here, make sure you download it. And when you go in there, it's going to let you update your software and then all the firmwares. If you're only using a Micron 5, you don't have to download everything that's in there. Download for what you have. So make sure you have your Micron 5, your 5S. If you have a Smarty Cam, update that stuff so you can keep it. And then it's easy to go through and transmit that to your device with the button update device. If you guys have questions, I can always give you a link. The AIM YouTube channel has a ton of information on it. And there's a video that goes right into how to update a Micron 5. Rick put it together. It's a really good one. So once we get there, just so we don't have to look at all the data that I have, I pared it down to a couple sessions. One of the things that I really like using is this favorites folder. Is when you have all your events, you're going to have all this data, but you can go through and put a star with things and it'll bring it over to this recents and favorites. So I like to use that where maybe I have my best lap time, a session that had something really interesting in it, or that I want to go back to. It's a really easy way to get that. Someone had shared with me some New Jersey Motorsports kart data that I can share with everyone and go through. So I'm just going to start with that one. And the part I was getting to earlier is if the whole idea of data kind of is overwhelming to you, or if you're not really sure how to dig in here with Race Studio 3, one of the nice things that they did is right here, you can click this button and go to simplified. And that's going to take out a lot of options and a lot of ways that you can get lost in here. So when we open up a session with simplified, and I'm going to hide myself here so we can see the whole thing. What's pretty nice is it gives us some really easy standard views that we get to work through. And you're going to get RPM, speed automatically. It's always going to pop up there so you can work through that. And then you're going to have a track map that gives you the overlay on a Google map as long as you have the internet. And then at the bottom, a lap selector. Me personally, I don't use this lap selector down here a lot. I go to laps up here, this button right here. And we can zoom in and show you right where that is. But it's all personal preference and how you interact with the software and what really works for you there. So if you just want to compare two laps, we can take another lap that was really close, turn that one on, and then we get an easy overlay of the RPM and the speed. And we have the basics, right? This is where we can look at it and go, geez, the green one was slower here, turn one. We can see that point on the map. And go from there. We still have all the ability that we like if we click the channels button. With that, we can put up anything we want in here. So we can look at, say, lateral acceleration, left to right. And always remember that longitudinal is front to back. It's like longitude on the earth. And when you go to say it, your mouth gets long. So it's kind of up and down, forwards, backwards. Lateral is left and right. If you ever watch any stick and ball sports, football, you know the quarterback throws it to the side and that's a lateral. It gives you a way to kind of remember those two. So the lateral is a really good way to think about when you started turning or when you made the cart start changing direction. So these are great ways to be able to compare that. I was working with someone today. Some really nice things is if you work with a trackpad, or you have a zoom wheel on your mouse, or you have a touch screen, all those movements that you're used to zoom in or zoom out work while you're in Race Studio 3. So we can click a point and say, hey, we want to investigate maybe where this turn in was. And we can click the point. We're going to see it on the map over here. But then if I scroll upwards, it starts zooming in. And we can see right where those 2 points start to change. And one of the things we can do in there is if we look to the top of this line, we're going to see it was at 948.7 feet. So that's the distance from start finish that we started that activity or that point. And then if we go to the next one, we can see it was 958 feet. So it was a 10-foot later turn in. An easy way to do that, if you're comfortable with it, one of the buttons I use a lot is if we go back to our first point, it's called the delta button. And it's right up here. And what the delta button does is it gives you the measurement between two different points. So when we click delta, and then we go back and we click our second point, we're going to see these little lines that it's a little bit hard. You can see the red line right here. And what that does is it gives us the difference in those 2 points. So we can see the difference in distance, 14.5 feet. We can see the measures that we had. And then here we can see they changed by 0.12 and 0.1. So the delta is something I use a lot when I'm going through and I'm trying to figure out what was the difference of maybe when I hit the brakes, of when I turned in, when I lifted off the throttle. Anything we can see in the data, the delta gives us a really great way to do that. And then the other cool thing with the delta feature is we can grab these lines and then move them where we want them. So we can start tweaking these around if we didn't click our point, or if maybe we want to go somewhere further. So hopefully that gives you a couple ways really quick that you can look at the time distance in here and get some information from it. The next one that they give us is an easy split times report. I think a lot of people are pretty used to the idea of what a split time is. And if we hop back to the time distance and we zoom out to our whole session, right now we see we don't have the splits above it because we're in the time mode. We can click this button that looks like a stopwatch and change it back to distance, and then we'll see a ruler. And when we do that, we get the segments across the top. Once we have those segments, what's really nice is that we can see where they go. We can also go in here and choose to color our map by the segments. So we can color it per split. And then now these colors up here match the colors on our map. So we can say, oh, we still have delta on. We can go in here and say, here's our second split. And it goes from this point to this point. And while we're in there, we can hop to the split report and see, here's all that information for that sector. We have all the individual values in it, and they're color coded. So red's the biggest one, which here, obviously it was so much off that we know that was an outlap, so we can turn it off and recompute things. So we get our highest value was red, and it's 6.518. Our lowest value is blue, 5.992. And then we can get down here and we get the basic statistics. And we get an average, a median, best theoretical. And that's really for the lap where it reads all those lowest points and puts them together. The maximum value, a standard deviation if you're into the math part, and then the best rolling, which is highlighted by yellow, which is a real lap that you drove. It's my favorite out of these things because it's something you can really do. I'm going to hop back over here. Elliot asked a really great question that comes up a lot. How do these segments just show up? They are auto-generated, and it's really based on lateral Gs. So it's when the logger or the device in the cart goes from a positive to a negative and they cross zero, and it builds that. And once you kind of know that, you can see how that makes sense in the map and what it does. I'm going to turn off one of these laps. Now, sometimes they're okay, sometimes they're really not, but we can change them into anything we want. And let me show you how to do that really quick since we're here. and it's something that catches a lot of people. So to start doing that, we go to this map, or this button that looks like a map right up here in the top right, and we're going to go in and click on that and go to our track map and segment selector. When we do that, what I like to suggest to people is go in here and create a new one. Because this is the one that RS3 did. You can always go back and use it. And when we go here, we can click the center button and it says to clone it. And you can click clone it. And I'm just going to call this one, say, MR. And then we can apply this one, and it's going to ask if we want to use it for all the sessions that day. So you had 10 sessions, it automatically applies it to all of them. Here we only have one, so it's not as big of a deal. So it looks the same at this point. Well, the trick here now is we get to go in and we can right click on those segments and then unlock them. Now we can move these any way we want to a point. One of the neat things you can do is you can click the cursor and then divide it at that cursor point. The way I typically start to think about segments is I will go in and remove all the segments. And then I start to divide it up. So I look at this, and I've never driven this track. I've never been there in person. I'm just going to look at this and start picking out my points. And I go, this is the front straight through turn 1. We are before the next brake zone, so I'm going to divide this one at the cursor. I'm going to go down. This is a pretty good chicane. Comes up, so we will divide around here again. Same thing here. We have a U-turn. I'm going to take this whole part because it's all looks like it's pretty flat. And divide here. I'm going to leave all this linked just to create a nice big segment. And then we're back to the start. We notice the colors are different. Everybody works their colors different. We can set these colors a lot of different ways. Me personally, a lot of the times I just make them alternate just so I can see which segment and where things are. That helps me a lot. So then it does the same. When we hop back over here, we see our segments. You can color them on the map and it flows through all the data. I see you guys have a couple of questions. So let's grab those while we're doing it. If I'm looking at timing data on Speed Hive or Alpha Timing, and I see my competitor did sectors 1, 17.6 seconds, how do I know where sector 1 starts and ends according to the track's timing system? That's a great question. You have to work backwards through the data a little bit. So what I would probably do is go back to time mode. And again, that's the button right up here. That right now it's a ruler because we're in distance. And if we click it, we can go to time base. And I would try to work your segments backwards. So we know time at the beginning of the lap is 0. And then if we go through, I'd see if we could find 17.1 seconds. Say here is pretty close, and we know it's 11:42. We can do a couple things here. A pretty neat feature that we can do is we can just remember that point and use it. We can also add a comment. And what's neat with these comment lines is we can say sector 1. I'm just going to put guess and we'll know what it is. Sometimes you have to go back and redraw it. It didn't give it to me. Here, it did, I'm sorry. You can see this line. And now we know where that segment is. We can go back to our distance base. We have our segment. We have to unlock our splits again, and we'd be able to divide at the cursor. So it's not super easy because all the different systems don't talk to each other, but you could work that way. And then you could add your first and second segment and move to the third one, and so on. I will hit the next question quick after, so I can set my segments to match what the track system is recording, displaying on these live timing websites. Yes, you can set them to match. The challenge is going to be, without knowing an exact distance from start finish, it will be very hard to necessarily make those perfect. Sometimes one of the things you can also do is using the Google Earth or whatever imaging. Sometimes you can pick up a line in the track, like it almost looks like there's one there, maybe something here. Sometimes you can get lucky and find that. If they have a good start finish line, sometimes you can see it there. So you just have to be careful in how you figure it out. But with some playing around with it and some backwards kind of math, you'll be able to get them pretty close, I think. And then Harjit had a question: how do we shift the trace on the map? Super common question, and one I would love to hit here. So the buttons up here let us navigate how these maps work, and you can always go back to the center and it'll show us the whole thing. And I'm on it. The root of your question really comes from how this is all shifted. And what I'm going to do, one of the panels we didn't get to yet is the track map. And a couple things as we get there that I really like to show people. Up here you have these buttons for the line thickness. A lot of times I will set it thicker, especially if I'm coloring by some good measure. So I'm going to go 5, and we can see this really doesn't overlay on this map well. This is a really loaded problem and a really loaded challenge to get these to work right all the time, because there's a lot of things going on. We're working with the GPS satellites that are 12,000 something miles above the Earth that are transmitting down these low power signals that we read off of. And then we have the map services like Google, Bing, and some of the others that then have their own satellites, and they take pictures of all this stuff and they put it onto various systems that we get to grab from and try to put our data on. But just like your the globe you have at home or that you had when you were a kid, how it makes things look wrong at different points because we're taking a flat 2D picture of a 3D thing and then we're trying to make it flat again, it messes everything up. It can change a lot. And one of the ways I really like to show this is up here on the top right, we have the tile button, and we can change the layers. And when you go in here, it defaults to Google, but we can go through some of these different services. And some of them are more located in different parts of the world. If you're in Europe, you'll get some that work better. We can see on Bing, this one shifted about the same. If we look at Mapbox, that's when we're not getting info here. This one, different sort of one. Sometimes these are also used in rallying or different forms of sport. We can see that one is far worse. The same underlying data, but shifted way worse because their map base is off, or in relation to ours. This one's about the same. So sometimes we might just have that shift. And I always like to really point out that it's a rough reference. It's not necessarily a set thing. It's one of the hardest parts to do in data is to get those things overlaid exactly right. And if we hop out of here and we jump over to one of my sessions, we can probably see that it's a little more accurate. Sometimes it completely depends on the imaging, and sometimes it's on the day. So this one you can see looks pretty accurate. And sometimes it works out pretty neat. You can see my GPS is mounted right in the center of my car, and you can see that looks like it's pretty darn accurate to where I drove. You know, it's like half a car width off these. This is a line of cones that they put out, and you can see how close it goes. So sometimes it's going to be great, sometimes it's going to be off a little bit, but it's totally a variation of what is in the underlying maps and everything else. I wish there was a way I could just click and do it. It's one of the ones I think the software team's been working on and hopefully we get there at some point. But if we kind of hop back to our basics that we get in this simplified analysis, we can look at the channels report, and it comes populated with very basic information, but we can add to it easy enough. Is here we get the lap times, we get our lap distances, and I'm gonna turn this one off as well. And this is the distance driven in the lap, and we can turn off the laps that are kind of way off to get better information out of it, because we can also turn on the statistics here as well. This one's giving us our max RPM, our max speed, and our min speed, which is really nice information. Me personally, if we go to the green button up here, I always like to include like minimum, maximum, and I'll always put in longitudinal and lateral g-forces. So did I miss some? Lateral acceleration and longe acceleration, because I feel those are really good ways for me to be able to go in and quickly sort of evaluate, am I hitting those same peaks every time? Or is there a lot of variability in my data? So here you can see the minimum was 1.81, and we can size all these panels kind of how we want them. So I can make that a little bigger so we can see the whole lap. So that 1.81 was on a lap that was 0.3 off the best. So not way off, but we see the G-forces were quite a bit different than the 2.24. So it gives us a spot, maybe if we're a single person, we don't have a lot of data to share with, it gives us a spot we can start looking into and seeing if it's something we need to make the same everywhere. Same thing with longitudinal. This is your braking force when it's minus. So it gives you a great chance to then start to look at this and say, am I braking at the same amplitude, the same amount of slowing, the same hardness every time, and being really consistent in that, or is there a lot of variability? And here we can see there's a fair amount of variability, because it goes from 0.76 to 0.46, right? So it's 0.3, it's almost 50% of how hard this person's braking, almost double. In looking at all that, it also takes a little bit of your own analysis to say, is this that I'm braking this hard because maybe I was avoiding a wreck and I was doing something evasive, or was it because that's how hard I can actually brake for part of the track and I can reduce lap time there? It doesn't give you the answers, but it gives you a spot to look and to start working through it. Same thing on the acceleration. This one's going to change a little bit, and it's harder because if you're at a slower minimum speed, you're going to be able to accelerate harder, versus if you had a higher minimum speed for the whole lap. But it's a great way to take a look at things and really go through and start looking at it. The next tab in the simple analysis is your track split tab. And this is a way to think, or the way I like to think about this one, is it's really a channel report, but it's based on splits. So maybe why would you want that? This is a great way to look at your consistency in even smaller portions of the track, because when you're trying to improve how you're driving, or you're working with someone, whatever it might be, if you look at it and you just go, okay, this session I'm going to go out and I'm going to drive faster, I'm going to do better, right? Those are really hard measures, because across a whole lap, there's thousands of decisions you're making and all these inputs. If you have active hands like me, you're on the steering wheel 1,000 times alone, let alone what you're doing with your feet and your body weight and everything else. So when you get down to this track split report, what it lets you do is take all that big part of the track that you had in the channel report and start slipping it down into a smaller and smaller portion. And as we get that, it lets you hone in on things even more. So what you see over here is a list of the lap distance across it. And I'm just going to zoom in for a minute just so you can kind of see the scroll, and then I'll come back out. But again, we can do the same thing. We can turn on these statistics really quick. And what that does is it lets us see the variance in our first segment was an average of 409. The maximum was 412. The minimum value was 407. So our lap distance was pretty good. That means we have a pretty consistent line, something I like to see. And we can use that to go with what's our minimum speed, because there's one corner here and that's going to be our minimum speed. How consistent were we on minimum speed? This goes back to the idea of segments. If we look at the segments here, one of the neat things we can do is divide the track up so every corner is its own segment. It's way too many to do real analysis. Like, you can't do a time-based analysis to see what you're doing. But if you do that, when you hop back to this track split report, what you're going to get here for every single split is your minimum corner speed. It's a neat trick to be able to go in there and get that. And all you have to do is do the corner splits. You don't have to do it. There's no fancy math. There's no extra work to set it up besides making a track map with all those splits. And if you clone it and save one like I showed you, you can always refer back to that. So the tracks that you always run, you could have multiple segment maps. So you can have the one that groups all the corners. That's going to be how you drive it and how you really want to analyze a chicane being all together, versus the individual corners that you could then break that chicane up into 2 pieces or 3 pieces and see what was my entry apex, what was my middle apex, my exit apex. How fast was I in each one of those? And the software will give it all to you. And then you can go through, and this track button right up here, again, lets you pick which segment you're looking at. So if we scroll over, there we go. You can see you get what segment it was. So very quickly you can dig into that data. I found that to be one of the ones that's really helpful when you start to go down and really compact things and try to get a little more granular in your data and figure everything out. The last one we get is the overall track map. We are zoomed into a segment here. So I'm just gonna hop back over to my time distance, which the way my mind works is I always think of it as sort of the controlling one because it's where I think about things the most. It's how I work with the software. But wherever we're zoomed in here, it's going to show us the same thing on the track map. A really cool feature that helps a lot of people is if you right click, you can pick the settings and then you can pick the color method. And when you pick this color method, let's see if we can get this to scroll over a little bit. There we go. You can color per channel, and any measure that we have, we can then put in here. So one that helps a lot of people is simply GPS speed. And now we have a rainbow map of the track where we drove, showing that rainbow speed on it. And we can see the reds where we went fastest, the blue where we went slowest, and it gives us a great measure. The other pretty neat thing we can do is they've added this play button at the top. So if you're one of the people that likes that lap replay, you can click play and it will play through the lap for you. And you'll see when you pause it, all the values that you have in your channels list will change with it because it's always dynamically linked. Whatever one point's reading, it does that all the way through. Hard said in this view, so I think we're back here, and let me know if that's right. I find it very clunky to use the segment selection menu. It'd be great to have a row of segments that I can just click. I know what you mean. In the simplified view that we're using right here, you can do it through the segments up here, or you can use this one. One of the other ways that we could do this, and it's a tiny bit more advanced, if what you can do, the way I would do it is I would, we can't do in the simplified view, we can't do how I would normally do it. And let me show you the difference, because we kind of went through what's in the simplified view, and hopefully it gives you a way that you can kind of look at this and see some different ways to interact with the software in the most basic form. I think that's a great way for a lot of people to use it. So here, if we hop back to the where it says simplified and we go to advanced, what I'm going to do is open this session up again. And we have the same information, but now we can do math channels. We can edit things around a little bit more. So if we're in this track split report, what I would do, I would right click, go to my panels layout. I'd add a panel on the bottom and then choose time distance. So this one, the way it was made, this is probably a good opportunity to talk where when we go to the advanced parts, we can get as advanced as we want. We can really dig into things, make the profiles and the screens look any way we want. And if I start to lose you guys on this, please put something in the chat and I'll back up or cover it in a different way to help you out. Because I can usually work through this stuff pretty quick just because it's what I'm doing all the time. So here we can keep adding panels anywhere we want. So here I need to add a panel to the left. I'm gonna choose my channels list. And what I actually wanna do, I'm gonna remove this panel just to change my layout really quick. And I'm gonna add it back so it's just on the top. I'm gonna choose track map. So I can skirt this over. So now you can see I have the track map showing. I have a time distance in the bottom. This is the way I almost always work. And then I have the segments up here. So I can pick a segment here and it'll show that. And you see the time distance moves with it. What we can do with that is now I can interact with the time distance and I can just double click and it'll zoom. Maybe that's another good one. When you're in the time distance, there's, like I said, a few ways to zoom. Is you can click and then you can use your pinch, or like my mouse has the scroll wheel, so I can scroll and it will go in and out. You can do that way. You can also hit the up and down key, or you can double click in this segment bar and it'll zoom into that segment. So here, if you want to look at 3, you can double click it. You'll see this switches to segment 3. This is segment 3. We have segment 3 on the map. And then I've never tried it, but since we're talking about this, it's a pretty good idea. Let's color it maybe by lateral acceleration. Just pick one. So that's pretty cool. So now you can see the lateral acceleration for the selected lap. And go through there. So it gives you a lot, and you don't have to go through that other menu. Do you ever mark ambient temp or setup notes in your session so that when you view it 3 weeks later, you see, oh yeah, ambient temp. Oh, that's a great one. I love it. And let me show you a trick. If we go back to all of our sessions where we have it picked here, let me hop out of that screen. We've selected our session. And then down here on the bottom, you're going to see a couple buttons. And we have a lap summary, which is pretty nice. It gives you some basic info. You have the standard time distance that you get to look at. We have the track map view, and there's a weather button. With this weather button, if you have internet and you update this, it will give you all those ambient conditions. So the red line is the time of the session, and you can see it, and then it's going to give it to you here. So it was 85.5 degrees, 40% humidity, 14.8 PSI pressure, a 3.4 mile an hour wind in that, I guess the south direction there. And it says 0 degrees, air correction factor, density, altitudes, all that kind of stuff. Then if we go back into the session, another pretty cool thing that AIM has added recently that I think don't get used quite enough is there's a log sheet, and it's this button right here. In that log sheet, we have the weather conditions that will get populated, and in these you can reference these if you're a math channel user, that you can go in and then reference them to use it in your math channels. So these are super powerful. In one of the webinars I did with AIM, we use this a bunch. So you can put general information in here about the run name comments, so you can put setup data in here, but also when you get in, you can put in engine information, spark plug information, weight and ballast information if you have that and you want to include it, fuel loads and consumptions. Maybe not as applicable to us as gearing as well. So really powerful way to tie in a lot of that. Casey's question, good one. On a 5S, can we plot roll to get banking angles? On the top of my head, I'd say no, there's not a really good way to do it. So I haven't tried to do it off micron data. I've tried to do it with a car on, we were running a car at Daytona. And the nice part about Daytona was I was able to get the banking angle because it's consistent in the middle of the corner and it's published. So I went off that and I integrated all the gyro movement to try to get that. And it wasn't accurate because where things start to go awry is that even on a kart, your tires are like springs. So in between this angle you have for the track, and then you have the tire that will squish. And that couple degrees or that couple quarter inch or whatever is enough that it really starts to throw off the angle. So you might be able to do some math to integrate the, which measure would we want to use off here? We could integrate off of, no, we don't have a gyro that way. So no, there's no way we could do it off those. Maybe with some fancy math you could get close, but I don't think it would ever be accurate. In the Micron 6, that is a really great question. I don't have one yet. They haven't been released to anyone. They have said that it will have the 6-axis gyro in it that you could use for steering position, or so you would be able to calibrate it with the wheel straight and then turn it. In that, it's going to know the roll of how much it turned. Now, with that information, if you had the Micron 6 hard mounted on a nacelle or a cowl or something, where it always stayed at one level, you might be able to use that data to then calculate roll. I'd have to try it, and then it's one of the ones that gets really hard to get that data. With some good IMU data, you might be able to back calculate it, but there's a lot of drift when you get into the accelerometers and trying to use them that quick. So I don't think it would be clean and straightforward. But it's something I try. It's actually, like it's for my car. I haven't put it in yet. This one is a 3-axis IMU, but no gyro. So it's just the G-forces that I can plug in on my car. And I was going to run some experiments with that this summer, trying stuff out. Yeah, and as Casey said, there's no vertical accelerations in there. It's one of the ones, if you have one of the units that does have the IMU information, I think the original 5s had it. The 5Ss don't usually. You could try to work with that data and see, but again, it gets really tricky because there's so much noise in it, and the calibrations, the noise, and the vibrations in there can really throw it off quite a bit. So hopefully that gets us through kind of the basics of a bunch of these, and I think the simplified one's really good. One of the questions I thought would be pretty good to hit was somebody in the group asked about an XY graph for the friction circle. And that's one I think is really powerful and it helps a lot of people. So I'd love to be able to hit that here too. Let's see, if I ran one session with an 81 tooth rear sprocket and another an 83 tooth sprocket the same day, how do I tell which is faster? Just top speed, the straight, delta between the and I am probably going to be the guy that goes against the grain a little bit. I will almost always take acceleration out of corners over top speed. Because if we think of the lap time as the sum of all the area under this curve, the way I can get more area is to move up. Let me hide here. So I'm just going to turn off RPM, make this really big for us. And let's go in here, make this line thick so you can see it. So when we look at this, the lap time is really all the distance under here. The higher we can move all this up, the lower our lap time goes. So to me, the easiest way is I can make this peak a little bit higher, or each of these peaks higher, like maybe just this one, and this one. But it's going to be hard to get this one because we're going to be in the wrong spot and less optimal. So to me, what I would almost always take, and my experience shows that if you can increase this part of the graph everywhere, it lowers your lap time more than making this single top speed higher. I think as a raceability, as a drivability part, it also aids you a lot because very few of us, when we're driving, our mistake isn't carrying too much speed in the corner. And if we do carry too much speed, we run out of road on the exit, like we overcharged it, we do something else, we end up with a slow spot, and we have to accelerate out. So if you can accelerate out, if the cart will dig better, it lets you have more lap time because it makes up for your mistakes. I think a lot of people have been in a situation, they've been driving and they're either in a setup that takes the whole track that you can't hold it and it's not raceable, or if you ever race like in a handicap way versus where you can carry more speed in the corner and somebody else has more top end, you see how it plays out. And usually if you can get them in the corners, you end up being able to make the pass on them. That's how I always look at it, and that's kind of my philosophy when I have to pick gearing. But there's people that go the other way. I've worked with champions who are all about that number at the end of the straight. So it really, it's something to play with. And if you make good data and you keep the good notes in your log sheets and everything, it's a great way that you can run sessions back to back, make sure the weather is pretty consistent, everything else, and then see which one works. But again, kind of for you to pick exactly what you want, or how you like it. But let's hop in here and make sure we have enough time. I want to make that XY plot with everybody because I think it's a pretty important one to get you, and it helps a lot of drivers really understand how the corners work. So here we can see the scatter layout, and that's going to give us a scatter plot. So I click that, it pulls up one. We're going to have a whole bunch of information here. And it's going to plot any channels that are over here, it's going to plot over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is we can see that the measure that's selected in the channels list is the one on the y-axis. It goes up and down. So I'm going to turn these two off. And the way I usually work is I put my longitudinal acceleration going up and down. And then on the left or right, we can use this arrow right here and choose our X channel, which is the left and right. And here, I use these search bars all the time. We can type in LAT for lateral, pick it, and we should be able to get our XY plot. A couple things to this is, one of the things I like to do is, we haven't talked about it, this laps button up here is so powerful. When you click it, and let me just see if I can do this without having it take off on me. You can, oh, not well. You can pick all your laps. You can pick your best 3. You can also get in here and pick your best segments from a specific corner, or you can pick it for, say, your best 3 segment times, your best 5, your first lap, your first 3, your last 5, you know, so on. So I think this one is super, super powerful. And what I like to do is I like to go, if you do all your laps, it's going to give you all different ones. Powerful, but not the way that helps me the most. I'm going to show you a cool trick that I learned. If you go back to your best lap, in here, we have a couple buttons that I think end up pretty important. This one's called Snap. If you use Race Studio 2, when you had to align laps, you probably use Snap all the time. In Race Studio 3, you don't have that problem. But what it lets you do is unsnap the laps, and then this one is zoom out, and it zooms out to the whole session. So when we click this, what it now does is it zooms out, and you'll see we have all of our laps listed across in our time distance, and we've turned on all of these laps in the lap bar, and we have all these points up here, which to me is super powerful. Even cooler, you can right click and choose your color methods, or we can go up here and we can pick our color method. And what I'm going to do is say the first one we want to do is speed. Why would you want to do that? Sometimes I just sit here and I start coloring by different things because I know over here is left turns, over here is right turns, this is slowing, this is accelerating. But what's the scale? Are there any that outlie? So these we say maybe not. And then I just start picking channels. I go in here, choose another color channel. Curvature. That is like GPS radius. And let's pick GPS. Do we have radius? You know, that's the sharpness of the corner. And we can see maybe the scaling's not great. So one of the things we can do is if we go to our channels list over here on the left, and you can see we're up here on the top left, we can clear that search bar and take all our channels out. We can find radius, we could type it in the search bar. What I'm gonna do here is go in, and it's automatically scaled, but what happens with radius, and this catches people all the time, is when you go straight, when you're just going straight down the straightaway, the radius is infinite. It's some humongous number that doesn't really apply to us. When we turn, we're going to get those tight radiuses. Maybe it's 30 feet, 50 feet, 300 feet, something like that. So when we go into this box, what we want to take is, right now, 35,000 is basically completely straight, some giant number. Let's change this to maybe 500 and apply it. And then we're going to see this graph starts to change a lot. And maybe we go, say 250. And this is when really what I do is I start coming in here and I start playing around until I get something that starts to look more useful to me. So now we can see our biggest numbers are the red, and we're going pretty straight. The darkest blue ones are our tightest radiuses. We can see something there, but we can see there's lighter blue ones that pull some more G's. So that's kind of interesting. It might give you pause for something to go start looking at and seeing maybe why it did that. Another important one, we talked about it earlier, is up here. We have our line and our dot size. I will frequently make these dots bigger. One of the ones I got from Roger at AIM is you can set your lines in here too. So here it gets a little bit busy when we have a lot of laps, but if we go back and we pick just our best lap, what's pretty neat now is as we go through our data, we can see how these points connect. We can also double click on that segment again and see the zoomed in portion. And as we work through here, we'll see that work through. We can also click a point in here and then use our arrow key to walk our way along it. And it's pretty neat. What I want to show you as an aside, because somebody had asked about, oh, one more thing here before we leave. And this is pretty neat that I think helps a lot of people with the scaling and everything else. If we right click and we go into the settings, we can come down here and see where it says plot grid. And the orthogonal grid is the standard that we're used to, that is a tabular form. It's, you know, ups and downs, left and rights. If we go and we pick circular grid, now it's going to give us that circle background that really tunes us into a track map. So I'm just going to go back to our best lap. we can see that we're not quite circles. So I can pick this and shift my panel size around a little bit and try to get this to be more circular. Going the wrong way. Squish this up a little bit. There we go. So now you can see you have this really nice circular background that gives you some lines. So you can see this one's like half a G. We got 1G, 1.5, 2 Gs, 2 and an eighth. We can start playing around it. What's interesting that I get out of these a lot is in this one, which is the best lap, we have a point here that's reading minus 1.81 Gs. So it's pulling 1.8 Gs in one direction. But if we go over here, we're going to see we're pulling 2.1, 0.3 Gs more. Is that because of the driver and they're cornering one way? Is it a cart dynamic, and is it in the setup and the those things? Is it banking in the track? Or is it one that's just a matter of the person corners harder one way than the other for some reason? In cars, we find it a lot. Somebody is much better at being on the left side of the track and bumping curbs on the left than they are on the right-hand side, because they don't have that feeling for where the car is way over on the right, versus when it's on the left, they know right where the edge of the car is, because it's basically, you know, under your foot if you're driving like a street car. That's one of the ones I think makes a big difference to people. Maybe here it would be, if you guys want to see a quick math channel that I think is really great for people, and we don't have it in here standard, but AIM gives it to us. If we click this math channel button up here in the top right, we get a list of math channels, or the math channel window. And in here, there's a lot. What you're going to see is there's this set that comes from AIM. And here we can see it listed as vehicle. I'm just going to zoom in here. And they give us a ton. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the one I want to show you is, if we come down here, is GSUM. And one of the tricks to math channels is you see this gear next to that channel. We have to click it, and then I have to enable it for either all the sessions or the slogger. So I'm going to enable it for the slogger. And sometimes what's going to happen is we will have where it doesn't necessarily know the exact channel name. Let me just make sure I picked the right one, and I did. So what we can do here is go in, pick the right channel. So I didn't look. This one is inline acceleration, so it's longitudinal. We can pick this one, lateral, and see, it guides us a little bit. And this is one, if we lose you on this, you know, always reach out to me or AIM, and we're happy to help you out with it. One, lateral. And we can get you through these parts. We can do a video on it, and make sure you get what you need out of these inlines. So that's longitudinal. We can recompute it and then exit. So you'd say, why do you want to do that math channel? Well, here's something I find really cool. I'm just going to hop over the track map to do it. Now that we did that, we can choose to color this session by any channel we have. That includes math channels. So if we pick GSUM, do I never not work? It didn't. I picked the wrong one. Something didn't work right. Let's go back and check it out. I never mind when I have these problems. Oh, it didn't stick. Why didn't it? Because these sorts of problems are ones that all of us have that work with data. Sometimes the things work really well. Sometimes they give us a challenge. But I think it's important that you see, even people that are in here every day can end up with problems. So I'm going to use this one. This is the one I probably should have used before, the GPS from AIM that runs off the GPS accelerometers. We can say exit. And then now we're going to color by this one. So let's take 2, choose color channel. And then we can say GPS GSUM. Now here's what's pretty cool. This is your XY plot, your traction circle, your friction circle plotted on a graph. And I'm gonna make this really wide. This is kind of how I like to look at them. And you can see it. And the same thing, if we go over the scatter, we can do the same deal here. We can color this by the channel. We can pick that GPS GSUM. Now I'm gonna mess up that one a little bit, but I'm gonna make this really big. And you're seeing a little bit here. This is a lot of how I interact with Race Studio 3. I move stuff around, I change it. As you get comfortable with it, you can work through those things. So here, what's pretty cool is when you click one of these points way out there, you can see it's the furthest from the center. So it has the biggest GSUM, and you can see it's in the red zone. So I think this is one that helps a lot of people because sometimes this XY scatter plot doesn't really make sense to you. But if you're a visual person and you like that, this is a great way to see it on the map. And you can see just where you pulled it in the G-forces. And it's just important to remember this track going counterclockwise, all the lefts are going to be the same kind of plot color. So you're going to see those are going to be the lighter ones. And then the really hard, you don't have a really hard right, spots like this are going to be the other way. And in the GSUM, it'll always go bright because it's always a positive value. In the lateral G-forces, you're going to get pluses and minuses. And then the last part that I want to, this particular spot you clicked on tells us that the driver is braking and turning. Yes, so great question. If we click back to one of these points, so in the scatter plot, when we're looking at a friction circle, above the 0, so 0 point is right across, it's that horizontal line. Above that's accelerating, under that is braking. The further from that line, the harder you accelerate, the harder you're braking. The further left or right you are, the harder you're cornering. So anytime you see a point that's below and to the side, they're combining those inputs. They're trail braking. They are braking and turning some amount. Here, it's a lot. It's the furthest point out, and you'll see that's why it's the brightest color down here as we look at it. And then the same thing when you go up here, this point that's the furthest this way is the biggest acceleration in turning at the same time. And we can see this is the point on track. If we just go up, you can see that really makes sense because they're accelerating out of a corner for straightaway. And they're going to try to carry all that speed out. It's a really great way. We covered a bunch of stuff. The other one, and I'm just going to hop over to my data really quick to show, because I think it's one that is sometimes undervalued a little bit, is when you have a Smarty Cam, all the data in the video are always synced together. And what that means is if we add a, I got this, I opened this in simplified, so let's close it. We're going to open this up again. And when we have that, now what we can do is go panels, let's add a panel, right? Use movies. What's really great here is, this is a bad layout. So let's do this quick layout, remove. There we go. My RPM channel is called different. So here we just have our basic speed trace of the track. Make this a little bit bigger for you. But what's really cool is anywhere you click in here, when you bring in your Smarty Cam video, it brings it in. And what's neat with that too one of the ways I really like to set up my data, I like to have a track map down here all the time, so I can kind of see where my points are. It helps me, especially when I don't know the track. But you can click a corner and it's going to bring you to that point in the data and that point in the video. So what's neat with it is you can click and go, geez, it looks like I was up on the curb. And when you look at this video, you go, yeah, it looks like I was up on the curb. All of it's synced. So you get all the data that is in the, you know, the Smarty Cam says you're doing 52 miles an hour. There's no decimals here. It's 52.8. I run a track temp sensor, so the track was 72 degrees. I have my predictive time on there, my best lap, my rolling time, my throttle, my brakes, the steering input, RPM, speed, G-forces. So it's all there, and it's all done real time. So when you take this, the card out of the Smarty Cam, it's automatically laid. It looks just like this. And then you can play it in the computer just to watch it if you want. You can put it in a smart TV. But you can also import that into Race Studio 3, and it's going to give you this basic data set. So anything you have on this video in your standard 16 channels, so you're going to have speed, RPM, if you got a lambda sensor, steering, throttle, brakes, G-forces, lap time, all the lap timing measures are all going to be there. So it's another one that brings it in, and it gives you an additional way to work through your data. And it gives you that extra bit of information that you get to work with. So I think it's a really powerful way to then pull all this together, because we can color the map, we can have the squiggly lines, and we can have the video. So you can actually see what's going on. It also adds a lot of context. So if you were in a spot where, we looked at it before with the really hard braking in the channels report, you could then pop over here, look at the data and go, yeah, I braked really hard. You could look at the video and go, yeah, there was a wreck in front of me, I was avoiding it. Or no, I just braked harder, and how can I repeat that so I can carry more straightaway speed for longer, brake hard, get through the corner, not make the minimum slower. So I think that was a bunch of stuff. We're a little bit over an hour. If anyone wants to still hit something, post it up in the chat here and we'll grab it. I think otherwise we can maybe call it a night, and if people want, we can do another one. Do a monthly or kind of whatever works. It's also a chance tomorrow with AIM, and you can sign up at aimsports.com. You'll see the links for the webinars. We're doing one with Trey tomorrow, talking about all kinds of driver fitness stuff. You probably know him from his 24-hour antics, running everything. So I think those are always really interesting to see. Yeah, Elliot, I'm with you, man. I don't really watch TV. There's not too many movies that stick in my head. This is what I do a lot of, is I get in there and you can see where I start coloring stuff, try to play with it and do all that. It's what I'd suggest to you, like grab your data, just compare stuff, new stuff, old stuff, grab other people's data, play with it, see what you get. When you get questions, email me, email AIM. They're awesome to work with. They've got tech support from 8 in the morning Eastern Standard Time to 8 at night, because they got the office in Roanoke and they got the office in Lake Elsinore, California. You can always email me. I check my email all the time. I'll answer you as quick as I can, which is usually pretty quick. You can call, text, whatever works for you. I answer folks on the weekends, so if you're having problems, I'll do my best to get you the information so you can keep racing and doing stuff, because before I ran this as a business and I did everything, I was a super enthusiast, and I knew how much it meant to me when somebody would help me on a weekend or at night when I was having trouble, and I really planned up for this. So I try to be that person that helps everybody else out. So thanks everybody for coming out. I had a lot of fun doing this. I hope you guys had fun. Feel free, if you have more questions, reach out, post them up at KartPulse. We can do more of these as time goes on. I'm happy to do it. If people want to share data, we'll go for it. Oh yeah, email, matt@trailbreak.com. And I'm going to throw it in here really quick. Super easy. Hit me up anytime. I'll post some more stuff into the KartPulse. Yeah, Thanks for coming out, and I'll be talking to you guys. Have a good one.